All right, good evening. I am calling to order the December 12th, 2023 Fountain City Council meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Mayor Thompson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Estes.
Here.
Councilmember Hinton.
Here.
Councilmember Corey.
Here.
Councilmember Rick.
Here.
Councilmember Herzberg.
Here.
Councilmember Duncan.
Present.
All 7 members present.
Thank you. And that takes us on to item 4.1, presentation. Presentation on Switchbacks FC Unified Team. Yariv Ben Naim.
I don't see Mr. Ben Naim here right now, so Madam Mayor, so if we could move on to the
All
next
right,
item,
we'll
that'd be
move
great.
on, and hopefully he'll make it. All righty, that takes us on to the Blast Site Pedestrian Mobility Corridor, EPA Brownfields, R5. Ms. Bailey.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Public. Appreciate some time this evening to wrap up an initiative that's been going on for the last 8 months. Economic Development Director, Kimberly Bailey, City of Fountain. Sorry about that. So we'd like to wrap up. I'm actually presenting on behalf of the coalition this evening. So the coalition is made up of the constituents listed at the bottom here, the City of Colorado Springs, ourselves, D11 School District, and so I'm presenting the findings from that coalition initiative. In addition, it is actually listed as one of your strategic objectives, objective number R5, under your initiative of the strategic plan. So it's kind of a dovetail effort of 2 reports in one. We're going to see if this works. Okay, so the City of Fountain focus area is listed to you on the left. This is just a brief recap. There are 5 sites that were identified, listed there on the right. And the bottom square star that you see there is the one that we are discussing tonight, which is the Blast Site, which is a conceptual land use project. So the Blast Site is a 1.14 acre site between Missouri and Illinois. It is to the west of you, 1 block from this location, but is actually assembled from a multitude of adjacent lands. Phases 1 through 3 is what it's contrived of. We will break down each of those as we walk through a brief update. It is along a linear active BNSF rail line, and there are many communities that have this type of corridor, so don't let that dismay you, okay? And then it is actually a very pertinent project for Fountain Fort Carson School District 8. They have several school districts in this particular nucleus area, and so they were very much an active participant, as well as BNSF was an active participant in the project planning phase of this scope. The blast, if is unfamiliar with the terminology, is an 1888 train collision that happened in our community. It's pretty resident in our community historical folklore, and is something that we should catapult and bring awareness to. Before we started the project, more than 8 months ago, we as a working committee put together a goal statement. And that goal statement was to make sure that what we got as a byproduct from this working initiative under the Brownfields federal funding was that we were able to be in a really critical position to go after state funding, historical funding, things that we could line up additional needs for beyond just the findings report. So this is your study area. The Blast Park is listed in the phase 1, which is the middle scope. And I'm going to try to find my, there we go. This is your most concentrated area. It is under city ownership. Urban Renewal actually donated the site quite a while ago towards the parks program for development. And then you have your phase 2, which is just located to the south. And then phase 3 is in the northern end next to Aga Park. And we'll break down each of these phases briefly. Before we even get started into the findings and the master planning scope, I really want to give a shout out for the acknowledgements for the participants who really worked through this effort. We have several of them in our audience tonight. We have Rick Clemens, who worked with us. We also have Teresa Vieira, who's with the Peaks and Pines Brewing Company. Tamara Estes, sitting at your bench there, was actually one of our historians that worked with us on this project scope. And so we really had a great bandwidth of a working committee, as well as the specialist team that really guided the technical analysis with the consultant. This project is not something that's new. It's not something that just percolated because of the brownfields. This is actually a 50-year legacy project. So it started with the initial donation of the Aga Family Park to the north. And then as the development area started to mature and grow out, there have been numerous studies that really catapulted and intertwined with this particular project scope. There's actually a 3-mile school radius as well that was demographics, which really put pertinence on the need for a corridor of connectivity in this district. And it's hard to believe that within a 3-mile radius, you have 10 schools, 15 childcare facilities, and 10 churches. And so there's not really an ease of connectivity. You have to get across a railroad track. You have to get across an abrasive Highway 85, 87. And so creating a pedestrian mobile corridor for different generations to use is really an economic vitality measure for this district. Talking about the connectivity, the 1-mile bike loop is something that has been accoladed numerous times in the park's master plan as a top need. Public safety, we just briefly touched on. Outdoor spaces as well as heritage trails are something that have come up numerous times through recent studies in the last 5 years as well from the public. And then the natural waterway and connecting to that Front Range master trail that connects us to the east and west side of this jurisdiction. So the working committee really focused on certain elements, and that was the rail operations, the Old Town appearances. The Illinois and Indiana Transportation Improvement Project is critical for this project. And then also the regional trail that is undergoing through the Parks Master Plan, and then the civic and community uses, and very much so, not a last point, but a final point of emphasis is the safe routes to school. I can tell you I've had numerous screenshots on my phone that show the kids walking in the middle of the railroad tracks because that is the path of easiest approach. And that is actually illegal in this location as well. So the public safety, which launched a survey, actually, that launched, gravitated over 260 responses, which was actually really good during a end of school year exodus timeframe. And that really focused on the types of elements that would be utilized within this corridor. Trails or activity centers, historical markers, and also the fencing and buffering elements, which are really critical for the railway as an active rail line, but very much so very critical for the neighboring neighborhoods as well along this corridor. So as I said, the public survey launched, it identified undiscovered amenities in the district. It quantified the increased pedestrian activity in the district. It also identified support for district appearances and needs for better improvements to be stewarded in the area, and then really encouraged economic vitality for small business to enter the district. That is something that is an Achilles heel, and really the public is wanting more of. On the left is actually a screenshot of one of those pulse points in the survey. And the top two requests is your bicycle loop trail network, which is coming out of the Parks Master Plan as well. And then also the heritage trails to really catapult the history of the culture of the community. So this is a snapshot of what the working master plan looks like. We'll get into each of the 3 phases briefly, but it does address on-site parking improvements, roadway improvements, trails and bike routes allowances in the district area, alley enhancements. We actually have 2. That might surprise you because we really don't have a lot of alleys, but 2 are actually very critical to the connectivity of this master plan. Then you also have food trucks and mobility vendors or amenities that could be brought into the district through this land use design. Restrooms and shelters, and then I really emphasized already previously the fencing and the buffer allowances that need to be considered under the larger scope. So phase 1 is that middle improvement area that I showed you on that grand map. It is under city ownership through an urban renewal parks designation. What you see here, though, is the red is a bike loop, and it stretches from the north all the way to the south. It also does address the Ohio public crossing area. PD was very intimate with this project scope as well, and we have a challenge with crossing at a railroad crossing as well. And so you can't have 2 signal crossings. It's a conflict for public safety. And so the intent is actually to navigate people to use Ray Street Under the larger master plan from THK 2017, Race Street has actually already been designated as the pedestrian, more bicycle-friendly corridor versus Maine and versus Ohio. So Race actually gets you more north and south. And so creating a public promenade or an urban greenway corridor of public safety traversing in the district, you can create the bicycle loop that connects it all together. 1 mile is pretty adequate. That's usually what's required from bicyclists. I am not a bicyclist. I'm actually really scary on a bicycle. But others that are very intuitive with that type of vessel, a 1 mile is really, really critical to them. Then you also have the Livery Stable, which is located here, which is a heritage site in the district area. And then we also talked about the Adams Open Space. If you go on Illinois this way to the east, then you will run right into the Adams Open Space Trail. So you're really trying to connect the north and south district connectivity to other amenities in the district, but also creating a very safe promenade corridor that is separate from vehicular traffic. So phase 2 is just south of that area. And this is where you have the Illinois and the Indiana roadway improvement project undergoing that I know Todd briefed you recently on. That has been a critical component of improvement that is necessitated to allow for the flourishing of this urban corridor to be fully developed. It is not part of that Moving Fallon Forward project. I really want to clarify that. This is a separate emphasis, but that's a component that feeds into this effort. So in this area, we also actually have a private operator, which is the Peaks and Pines Brewing Company. You do have your first alley enhancement, which is right here. And that's another pedestrian connectivity pattern for those who may access the site non-vehicular wise, right? They don't need a parking lot per se. They can bring their bike from the Adams Space or a park or a school district elsewhere and be able to connect in without that vehicular mobility pattern. You also have plazas and patio spaces. It was really evident through the public survey process that the public didn't want programming space. They wanted space that they could use as they would like to use it, if that makes any sense. And so we really created more of a greenery space that is allowing that fashion to evolve naturally with family use. And then you have the Front Range Master Trail that actually is here, part of the Indiana project, connecting from the creek and the Fountain Creek corridor to the west. And that feeds right in through this corridor. And it expands that bicycle access beyond the 1 mile loop. That's part of this master plan. Phase 3 is to the north, and it really is predicated by Aga Park that was donated to the city in 1950s by that family. And then also there is a utility easement in this corridor as well that allows for traversing and use of that corridor just from a passive space, but not from a programming space. And so in this area, the Stantec consultant focused on improving the parking lot and the restroom functionality in the north end of Aga Park, as well as completing the full 1 mile loop radius that feeds all the way south as well. And then also in a future scope of study is the recommendation to create a pedestrian bridge crossing on public land from the Aga Park side to the middle school that is on the west side of 85-87. That would be under a future study scope, and as well as any future type of uses of this land mass would go under additional scope of uses as well in a future effort of land planning. So testimonials are huge when you engage through public surveys and different master plans at different levels. And we really found 3 that were really, really relevant. So under the current survey that was just completed with this effort in 2023, a public constituent mentioned that the Peaks and Pines Brewery in the Aga Park North sector, creating hubs of point of access, really create a lifestyle amenity that can rival anything in the Colorado Springs region and bring an amenity here instead of our community having to go elsewhere to find those lifestyle amenities. Also in 2020, the Fountain Creek Watershed District accoladed that any connectivity with the Fountain Creek corridor would create recreational activity and tourism, and then also create small business engagement and a healthier lifestyle. And that is documented within their master plan study. And then our study in 2015 of the Parks Master Plan really says priority needs to be placed on any type of trail connectivity nexus that catapults between the Jimmy Camp Creek and the Fountain Creek corridor. And this project lies right along the Fountain Creek vicinity area. So the reuse plans, we already talked about the 1 mile bike loop is a top need accoladed in that Parks Master Plan and through subsequent other surveys under placemaking in this district area. In addition, the quality of life and public safety improvements were mentioned. These were all mentioned in the master plans through public surveys. So it's nothing that a consultant is telling us, but these are driving measures that have been fed to us from the public. In addition, the multi-generational mobility use of that parks plan. In 2020, we talked about outdoor active spaces and historical walking trails was a key component. And then lastly is the nature ways and the connectivity that we mentioned with Fountain Creek. So in closing, that's really the snapshot of what is our BOB product of land reuse, stewarding, planning, creating this promenade corridor. And we have some recommendations. And the first one is mentioning that it needs to be put into the comprehensive development plan as well as the parks master plan. At no point in either location is the blast site mentioned in any of those vital master plans that stewarded ongoing grant funding pursuances. In addition, there are some zoning designations that need to be addressed to allow for that recreational type of use. And again, recreational is passive. Okay, it's called walking, it's called biking, it's maybe kicking around a soccer ball in a lawn pad. It's nothing that is high energy, high crowd density. In addition, the other recommendation is classifying the site as an urban greenway. We in economic development, as well as the Parks Department, have struggled with what is the label of this site area. We call it the Blast Site Pedestrian Mobility Corridor. Well, that's a little bit of a tongue twister and pretty elongated, right? So out of the study, it recommends that we actually label it as the greenway. And so a greenway is a shared use of path along a strip of undeveloped land, and it is an urban or rural area set aside for recreation or environmental project use. And a few of those examples are looking at Arkansas up here. This is an active railway, a pedestrian promenade, and then district parking. This is an active trail system next to an active railway. In California, right here next to each other, you can see this in Denver in numerous locations as well, this type of foot model. And then for our local geographic, how about Palmer Park? This is Palmer Park Lake. And then you have the rail activity that surrounds that lake, and they actually have a pedestrian bridge that crosses that rail and that roadway. So these are not farce ideas that are being recommended out of this master study. These are proven factual accolades of different communities and things that we could possibly resonate here. Another item of recommendation out of the study is the environmental assessment. We know under the urban renewal effort with rejuvenating what is now the Peaks and Pines Brewery, we've done phase 2 and phase 1 assessments there. We know what the soils pretty much consist of from a century-year-old railway line activity, but we do need to do further assessments up and down that linear corridor. In addition, a utility assessment analysis will need to be stewarded, and then also an assembly or a review of the assembly of the agreements that are in place. There are multiple agreements along this corridor that allow us to see the fruition of this land assembly, but they do need to have a finer tune and a finer evaluation of review. Lastly, in the closing, is we need to identify the grant funding and resources, which really have been identified by the Stantec consultant. And the highest and most pressing need to go after those is to really adequately label it as an urban greenway and adequately make sure it's referenced in those 2 prior studies I just referenced in the opening. Additionally, RFP issuance by the city. One is a civil engineering for site construction, evaluation of grading, but also is the wayfinding and the signage improvements was something that was catapulted out of this study. Hence, we brought that initiative to you last month and initiated strategic objective D15, which the RFP has just been issued last week to complete that effort in 2024. And then lastly is the pedestrian bridge and the bicycle bridge assessment. That is quite a process of evaluation and review, but that is something that is pertinent to the school district, safe routes to school, as well as connectivity and routes for the district area from businesses. We would consider moving forward with the evaluation of that recommendation. So in closing, this is your urban greenway recommendation from the coalition partnership effort under brownfields. This project report does complete our efforts under that 3-year scope, and I appreciate your time this evening. If there's any questions or comments, glad to gravitate those at this time.
On one of the slides, you mentioned that the park needed to be added to the comprehensive plan and the parks overall.
Yes.
What's the step on doing that?
Well,
Because sometimes they have to be in those plans before you can be considered for grants.
that is correct, and that's why that's a first
Yeah.
recommendation step approach.
Right.
And so we're already working with the Parks Department. We have a meeting with them on the approach of how to amend that plan. They don't have it in their budget wheelhouse until a couple years down the line, but we really do need to make sure an amendment to that plan does transpire for us to go after subsequent funding of needs.
So can an amendment be added before the plan is redone? Is that what you're asking?
That's what we're exploring at the moment with
Okay.
staff.
Okay, and the same with the comprehensive plan?
Comprehensive plan, we haven't broached that one yet. We were going to work with Todd and Christy and delve a little further.
Okay, all right. All right, any questions from any of their council members? Any questions from anybody in the audience?
I can barely hear you.
Well, I can barely talk, so I'll try to croak a little louder. Okay. All of a sudden, I'm losing my voice. So is there any questions or comments from anyone in the audience? Is that better?
That's better, thank you.
Okay.
I just have one question.
No, please come up forward and come to the microphone and state your name for the record, please.
Sam Fortune, are you going to turn this into a low-speed railway area then?
I'm sorry, a low-speed what?
Railway area?
No.
Then how, the safety of the children then? If you put in a green belt right next to the railway like that and they're not lowering their speeds, you're going to run into issues, because that's what they do up in Palmer Lake. It's a low-speed area, which in turns will clog up the railroad crossings even more.
Okay,
Just
thank
food
you.
for thought.
Thank you.
And again,
Kimberly to the mic.
yes, I'm coming to the mic. Just to refresh, there were 2 active participants from BNSF through the Working Study Analysis Group.
Anyone from the FRA?
Not from the FRA. Nope, not at this time. Are we good?
Please come forward and state your name for the record.
Kenny Chimino. I'm asking about that bridge that goes,
Could you speak in the mic, please?
I'm asking about the bridge, the bike bridge that goes from Alabama and brings them over to 85, 87. Isn't that where the police come out and go to 85, 87, and isn't that where our parking is? How is that going to work?
So, Mike, so that is a future study analysis. There's been no design engineering at this point under the Brownfields effort, but it does loop the idea of the Aga Park on the public side, property ownership, to the school district's property ownership. So it would be a span, and it should not impede public safety's access nor your private property.
So it just go over?
It's a, yes.
Oh, wow, okay.
I think the thing to remember about this, that arrow, I don't know if you want to go back to it, but that, on that layout plan, that arrow, that does not indicate location.
Nope.
Because they'll have to have a study, and in fact, it may be impossible, well, I guess nothing's, from an engineering standpoint, impossible, but maybe improbable, just due to the cost to do anything anyway. Or it may be more probable to do it further north where you have more
That's what I
open
didn't
space.
understand.
Yeah,
Coming
oh yeah,
down
there's the
onto
map right there.
Alabama right there where
Yeah.
the police come out and everything, or how
Yeah.
that was working? Okay.
There are some real technical challenges to make it happen. I think the arrow's mainly to get an idea that there's some sort of
General
connection,
area.
but not even necessarily where.
Okay,
At least that was the discussions I was
all
part
right.
of.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Any other
you.
questions from anybody in the audience? Okay, Kimberly, I do have a light on, sorry, from one of the council members up here, Councilmember Rick.
Yes, you're good, Kimberly. For the audience, if you are having hearing issues, We do have T-coil hearing loops where you can get earphones, and it will help broadcast it to the earphones so that you can hear more easily. That's all I have, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and I'll try to lean up a little bit more. Okay. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you. All right, we have a proclamation in honor of the 20th anniversary of the Fountain Valley Museum. Councilmember Estes.
Okay, I'm going to read the proclamation. Whereas the Fountain Valley Museum was established on December 6, 2003 to preserve and share the Fountain Valley's rich history, and it is celebrating its 20th anniversary in 2023. And whereas the museum has faithfully served the citizens of Fountain and the surrounding community for 20 years with the support of the city, and whereas the museum serves our city through dedicated volunteers and donated historical items from the local community, and whereas the museum strives to educate the public on the rich historical background of the Fountain Valley, and whereas the museum is a cultural anchor in the community, is an educational resource, and instills a sense of community pride and preserves our collective memory. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Fountain, Colorado does hereby congratulate the Fountain Valley Museum on their 20th anniversary and commend the museum for its significant contributions to preserving the history of our community. Done this 12th day of December 2023. And that we will be having a 20th anniversary celebration for the public, and that will be on January 13th from 11 a.m. till 3 p.m. at the museum. Everyone is invited.
All right. Thank you very much. That seems odd to write 2024 on your notes, but it is in 2024. All right, thank you, and thank you for bringing that forward. I cannot believe it's been 20 years since they started that. Thank you. Do we have Mr. Bin Naim here now? You don't see him here? Okay. Just give me the heads up if he is able to make it. All righty. That takes us on to item 4.2, boards, commissions, and committees. We have none tonight. Item 5, correspondence, comments, and ex officio reports. Mr. Trainer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have anything this evening.
Todd?
A couple of quick, just CDOT updates and informational. They're planning on some lane closures, night work Wednesday going into Thursday of this week. So just avoid that area if you can. They may cancel it to the weather. They're looking at the weather, so they've got some contingency dates. Also, we've been in touch with CDOT regarding the southbound lanes going over the bridge here on 85-87. They did have some damage from the storms, and for those of you that drive that, you might notice on the southern part of that, a pretty serious, almost what feels like a speed bump at this point when you go over that thing. So they're going to try to get somebody out there today or tomorrow to take a look at that and to fix that issue. So was on the phone with them today. So it was nice they're going to get out there that quickly on that. That's all I've got.
So the mess on the freeway possibly tomorrow night and the next night is exit 128 to exit 132, right?
Correct.
Everybody's going to be dumping onto Highway 85 if they do that work.
Yep.
Okay.
As they do those lane change movements, we'll see much more on 85-87.
Okay, so just be patient and
Sounded
home.
like to me, as I talked to the folks, they're looking at looking for other nights, and they'll let us know. They just think the weather's not going to work for them this week, so we'll see where they end up.
Okay, but we'll be getting notification out on Facebook pages in different ways if that changes so
Sure.
people can know. Yeah.
Yeah.
That just really jams up the whole south end of the town. Everybody knows that, so. All right, thank you. Troy?
Nothing from me tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Either chief?
Good evening, good to see you, nothing tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick things. We had, in combination with District 8, we served about 50 families at Welty. Some meals, Mr. and Mrs. Claus were there, Hulk was there, and they're up there doing the schools up in Fort Carson tonight as we speak. So we're doing the same thing, serving families a meal, and Santa and Mrs. Claus are there. We are doing our Blue Santa event this Friday. Approximately anywhere between 300 and 350 families are going to be similar to how they did the Thanksgiving turkey baskets. We're going to have the families report to Welty Fountain, and neighboring families are going to come, and they're going to get their gifts from Santa Claus there as well. So that's going to be a good event this Friday. Last, I just want to remind, now that it's officially cold every night, the legal way to start your car in the morning is only if you have a keyless entry system. Puffing is not legal. So if you have a car that has a key, you cannot start your car in the morning and leave your keys inside. We all know that auto theft in this region is very high, so now's the prime time. Just make sure you're within the law doing that. That's all I had. Thank you, Mayor.
And bring your packages in.
Correct.
I went by a house, and there's been 15 packages out front. So, all right, anybody in the back row? Mr.
Nothing,
Lewis?
Mayor. Thank you very much.
Okay.
No, thank you.
No, IT?
Nothing tonight.
Okay, city clerk?
Nothing, ma'am. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, that takes us on to public to be heard. Citizen, thank you very much. I'm just on a roll. Okay, Councilmember Rick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Fortune, the last meeting you asked us to look at home-based businesses. I've had 2 meetings with city staff so far. I've got another one scheduled with the city manager. I don't have an answer for you yet, but I want you to know I am looking at it. I appreciate that, sir. That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Corey?
Nothing tonight.
Councilmember Hinton?
Yes. I want to thank Chief Graham for the opportunity to be able to sit on a lieutenant's promotion board over the past week. It was a great opportunity to see our men and women in action and to be able to do that and serve it. So thank you, sir, for allowing me to be part of that. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Estes?
Just a reminder, the open house at the museum, January 13th, 11 to 3. Thank you.
Welcome.
And Senior Center is having their craft fair this Saturday from 9 to 3 at the Whitefield Rec Center.
All right. Welcome. And Councilmember Hersberg?
Nothing for me.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Duncan?
Thank you. I just have one announcement to reiterate that renewing your registration, I know that it's getting cold and the weather's getting bad, and I don't see, when I go into Safeway, I don't see that many people using our kiosks that's there. So you can go into King Soopers and register. They have a self-serve kiosk to renew your tags on the spot. So you can bring your renewal postcard and registration to access. Shop for your holidays, for your groceries, and renew your tags all in one place. So just want to put that out there.
Yeah, just be careful. I understand if you're military, you cannot get the discount at the kiosks. You still have to go through the DMV. So if you're looking for that military discount, yeah. Okay, all right, thank you. All right, now can I go to public to be heard? All right, all right. Takes a village up here some weeks, huh? All right, citizens may address the council on items that are not on the agenda. Council may not be able to provide an immediate answer, but will direct staff to follow up. Out of respect for the council and others in attendance, please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. I do not have any cards. I'm willing to wait a few seconds if anybody in the audience wanted to fill one out, but I haven't been handed any cards. Okay, all righty. That takes us on to item 7. I was notified right before the meeting started that staff is pulling item B from the consent agenda. So the only item we will have on the consent agenda tonight is item A. And all items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and will be approved with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item may be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately at the discretion of council. So we have consent agenda item A. What would council like to do with the consent agenda? Councilmember Estes.
Move to approve consent.
Councilmember Hinton.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. Is there any deliberation? Seeing none, please vote.
Seven yes, motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us on to old business. Item 8A, second reading of ordinance number 1796, setting appropriations for the funds, offices, and departments of the City of Fountain, Colorado for the fiscal year 2024, beginning January 1st, 2024. Mr. Lewis.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. John Lewis, Finance Director.
Shauna Dale, Deputy Finance Director. John and I are going to tag team this evening, and I apologize. I'm also losing my voice tonight, Mayor, so I apologize. But this is the second reading of Ordinance 1796 for the 2024 appropriation of the budget. The required public hearing in the first reading was held at our council meeting on November 14th. Can you go on to the next slide, John? And we've developed and proposed the budget as part of the two-year 23-24 biannual budget. Again, we did our work sessions with you all on June 13th and October 5th. And after the public hearing on November 14th, there were not any additional recommendations or changes to the budget. Since then, for the second and final reading of this budget ordinance, Exhibit A has been revised to account for a part-time staff transfer just between departments and also the cancellation of a maintenance service contract. And I'm going to turn it over to John, and he's going to go through the tables in Exhibit A for you.
Okay, thank you, Shauna. We have made no changes to the revenue, and as a reminder, I know you as City Council want to give a break to our citizens on property taxes, and so we are not including the general operating fund property tax mill levy that is historically 10.239. We are not including it in this ordinance because we do not know yet what the assessed values will be from which we will apply that mill levy. So once we receive that, we'll prepare another ordinance and bring that up to you. It will probably have to be a special session in January so that we can then meet the deadline, the new deadline that the state has set for certifying the mill levies to the county. So we will come back to you with that in January so that we can properly calculate what the discount will be for our citizens. So there's, and the property tax revenue that we have in here already accounts for a fairly large discount. So whatever we come up with will be pretty close to that. If we need to amend this for some reason, we will do that in 2024. The expenditures, as Ms. Dale indicated, we're discontinuing a maintenance service contract, and then we've also moved a part-time employee from neighborhood services that was in the recycling center over to parks. So other than that, no changes in the expenditures. Water fund, same thing. Electric fund, no changes. And no changes in any of the other funds. And we have here the proposed expenses for each of the funds and the grand total of all funds for the projected ending fund balances. And at this point, and again, public safety items will be that are restricted to the public safety fund, and that mill levy sourced by that revenue will be discussed at a later point. I think that's all I have. I'll open it at this point to any questions or other comments.
Mr. Trainer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I mentioned, as we were going through the budget process to the City Council, we still were waiting due to the special session with the legislation and what was happening with the mill levy. I didn't want to put, and us figuring out exactly what we needed to do with the 2B funds for the police and fire folks. Didn't put any increases in there for this proposal for salary increases for staff. I am going to propose a salary increase for staff, and if the council would bear with me for a minute, I'd like to walk through that if that's okay. Chris, can you pull that up, that presentation, that PowerPoint? I want to walk through a few slides here, and Chris, I'll just holler at you to change when I'm ready, but I'm going to propose a 3% pool increase for employees. The police increases will be based on 2B funds. They're going to, we'll have some information on that. There will be fire increases based on 2B funds, no increases to health insurance, and no increases to retirement as well. Okay, next, Chris. I wanted to show this. This goes back, provides a little bit of historic perspective on the wage increases. So the top line there and shows inflationary increases since 2017. Second line is Social Security increases. And then the last line are city employee increases. And then that graph essentially shows the same information but in graphic form. And you can see where the city employee increases are over that time. During that time period, city employees have received about a 4.1% increase less than inflation and 1.9% less than the Social Security increases. This year, federal and military increases are 5.2%, Social Security increases 3.2%, but I'm proposing 3% for the Fountain employees. Next, Chris. This right here, I wanted to provide some perspective as well on comparisons, because as we look at our employees, we have to compare with the market. One of the biggest challenges we're having right now, and we've mentioned this before over the past couple of years, is hiring. And so there's no way you're really going to be able to keep up with some of these cities, and the goal isn't to do that, but it's to try to keep it somewhere in the ballpark. You can see where Fountain is. The overall average for these communities is a 5.3% increase. However, if you look at just the 20 to 40,000, I tried to narrow that bandwidth down a little bit to communities that are closer to our size, 4.9%, that dropped it down. And then if you do that same group, but then include the local, you got a 5.1%. Again, I'm proposing a 3%. Next, Chris. I wanted to show on here the retirement comparison for communities, which most of our competing cities are part of the Public Employee Retirement Association. We're not part of that. You can see what they put into their organizations and they put into their retirement. You got the 14.76 contribution by the city, 9% by the employee, and that's a defined benefit. You can see here for Fountain non-public safety employees, we do the 4.5% contribution by the city, 4.5% match, 1% into the 457, and that's a voluntary number as well. Voluntary match by the employee. And you can see the FPPA pension as well. So we're not proposing any increases to any of that, but I wanted to provide that for comparison purposes so you can see where the employee retirement, how that compares with our competitors as well. Next, Chris. Okay, so the fire department as well has, and both chiefs can speak to the specifics of this, any questions you may have, but these are some of the areas where we really find ourselves at a competitive disadvantage. And I'm saying that relative to both, excuse me, police and fire and the EMS side of the house. So you can see what they're proposing based on the 2B funds, firefighter EMTs, a 5% increase, paramedics 5%, lieutenants at 6%, the battalion chiefs at 3%. And then you can see they're shifting 3 of our current firefighter EMTs over to lieutenant, and because they need to have leadership on the different shifts. And then they're shifting 6 of the current firefighter EMTs and 3 of the paramedic positions over to driver operators, again, to have that skill set available for those shifts. Next, you can see a retitle of the fire inspector, the deputy fire marshal, and the increase of that salary is largely paid for just from within our current budget. And then that's to establish a salary parity among the division chiefs. And then go to the next one, Chris. The police department, they're based on, you can see the no draw for their 2B dollars on the city's general fund, based on retention pay, increases approved during the 2B mill levy. The largest increase goes to the least senior officers, focusing on those entry-level officers and really generally your uniform patrol folks. Average increase across all pay scales is $4,300, and the chief of police isn't receiving any of those dollars as well. So I wanted to present that to you to give an example of what I'd like to propose. I think it's important that we ensure that we're able to remain competitive in the market. Last year we did a market study. We try to get our salaries closer to the market. As you all are aware, the market continually changes, and we're going to propose coming in this next year and doing another market evaluation study, and maybe try to do that every couple of years so that we're at least staying close. We're never going to really be able to compete 100% with the local market. I mean, you just can't compete with Colorado Springs and the county, but the hope is that you can keep it somewhat within the ballpark. So I wanted to share that with the council and get your sense. If the council's supportive of that kind of increase, then we would propose that we put it in the budget for this upcoming year.
And if they decide to do that, and when we make the motion, would it be as amended, Sylvia?
It would be, yeah, to amend it to increase to, to amend the budget to allow for the 3% increases and the 2B, I would be a little bit more specific, the 2B increases as proposed.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Okay, alrighty. I've got lights on up here. Councilmember Hinton.
Yeah, I just want to kind of just put this out to the public, like, this is a real deal when it comes to, keeping quality people. As I had the opportunity to sit on that promotion board, we have some real studs, and they know it. And they could go anywhere else and make more money. But, Chief's done a great job in keeping the people that he has there. But it gets harder and harder when they don't have the financial support to be able to do that. It was a really gutsy call to have another chief sit on the promotion board and to be able to look at those that were coming across and seeing their resumes. I'm just a firm believer that we really have to do everything we can to support our public safety and those that we have in the community to keep quality people, especially in our staff too as well. Thank you, Scott, for letting us know.
Councilmember Rick.
Questions for Chief Graham. Chief, on the slides, it had firefighter EMT, and then it has a different line. It had firefighter paramedic. Can you explain to me the difference between those two?
The difference between a firefighter EMT and a firefighter paramedic essentially is in their level of medical training. Think about a paramedic in terms of field medicine would be equivalent to in-hospital care. I would rate a paramedic right about with like an RN, a registered nurse. Not exactly, but that would be the closest comparison I can make. And so the difference between an EMT takes a semester, maybe a little bit longer to get licensed, whereas a paramedic takes anywhere up to 18 months to get licensed, depending on what they have to go through and the steps that they as an individual take to get there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions from anybody in the council? I really appreciate you taking time to explain this. This has been a really, really odd year. First, with legislative-wise. First, we had the repeal of the Gallagher, and we had promises for 5 months that the legislature was going to do something to reduce and fix the property tax increases that everybody knew were coming. And they did nothing. They essentially did nothing. And they did give us one good bill, though, that gave us the ability to adjust our mill levy annually without having to take it back to the vote, so that we could be more flexible in what we're doing, so that we don't have to take the regular mill levy and then give everybody a Tabor refund. So that was, I guess we'll give them 1 point. Then they called their special session and did minimally something, but not a lot. If you own residential property, you get a minimal amount of money you can take back, but if you own commercial property, there's nothing. Right. And so we decided to try to run a budget using that new bill they gave us to temporarily reduce the mill levy. But then they also, by going back in a special session and nobody knowing essentially again what they were going to do, put us all just in the hold pattern again until we, and you guys have been scrambling for the last couple of weeks since that session ended. Was it really only 3 weeks ago? Right. To rerun numbers and redo things and try to figure them out. And I really appreciate that. Normally at this point, everybody running budgets would be approving their budgets and their mill levies. But the mill levy property evaluations are not going to be ready until the end of December.
Correct.
So we're in another new situation where we're going to be passing a budget but certifying the mill levy for it later. And so this is just a year of adventures. And hopefully, the next state legislature and group in 2024 will actually do what they're saying, but I am not going to hold my breath. So, and so that is in this ordinance also that we're passing. It states in here that we're going to be doing that. So I just wanted to point those couple things out. So, and I believe, if I remember correctly, you said the reduction in the mill levy will save our citizens approximately $750,000 citywide.
That's what's budgeted now, and that's what we're going to try and stick with. Once we know what the assessed values are, we'll know where to adjust the mill levy so that overall citizens will save about a little over $700,000.
A little over $700,000. Okay, and that's rather than us collect it, like I said, and then
Right.
issue them a Tabor refund later in the year. We're recognizing that inflation is coming and it's continuing to increase in the price of everything, and so we're trying to say to our citizens, we hear you, and we recognize what's going on, and we're trying really, really hard. We've worked hard to try to do this as to help everyone out, and help everyone out equally and fairly, not collecting extra money in the Tabor refund where it's not going to be equitable.
Right.
Everybody's going to get the same check, but not everybody has put in the same amount of money. So we wanted to make it equitable. So with that, is there any further discussion from council? Any questions? Are there any questions or comments from anyone in the audience? If so, please come up to the podium and state your name.
I'm Fran Carrick, and I just wanted to address Mr. Hinton. Over the past few months, it has been made very clear that for years we have tried to keep up with Colorado Springs in salaries. And it's been made very clear that we are not Colorado Springs. A small business, and I'm going to use mine as an example, excuse me. We trained plumbers and we trained pipe fitters, and we paid them a fair market wage, but there was always the possibility and the probability that unless our working conditions were better than other companies, they were going to go to a bigger company for a job. And that's the same thing with Fountain. I do believe that we have the finest utility department. I love our police department, and I think our fire department is top drawer. But there's always going to be that risk of them leaving to go to Colorado Springs or Pueblo because we don't have the revenue, we don't have the infrastructure to keep those people here, to pay them what these other cities do. And until we get the revenue here, it's going to be that way. My thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak or ask any questions? Please come forward and state your name. IT, do we have anybody online?
No one online right now.
Okay, going. All right, we'll bring it back up to the dais. And last chance, council, do you have any questions or comments from anybody? Scott, any last comments? Councilmember Duncan?
Thank you. I just wanted, for the fire chief, police chief and the fire chief, how are we on staffing currently?
Sure. Councilmember Duncan, we are, with the two that we're going to hire in the next month, I'll be at 65. That's 3 short of full staff for me. So we're making really good progress as far as I'm concerned, finding quality people. So we'll be 3 short. We'll have those by mid-2024 if everything stays the same.
And for us, on Monday, the 18th, we swear in a couple of new paramedics, as well as a swearing in for one of the promotional candidates that will be taking the oath of office as lieutenant. That will trigger an opening at the firefighter level. And so once those take place, I believe we'll have 3 openings department-wide. I think all 3 of them are at the paramedic level. And that's been through a vacancy that was just created within the last couple of weeks, and then a couple of existing. I know that two of the paramedics that we are swearing in on Monday round out the 2B employees, the second half of our 2B employees. So we're getting pretty close to being fully staffed.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Hinton.
Yeah, this question is for both chiefs. Can you just explain to the public the importance of consistency in keeping people in the ranks as long as we can?
Councilmember Hinton, it's important, especially for the police department, as we are finding out our department's getting very young, the more people that are coming into the field. So my motivation to keep senior officers and experienced officers with the department is clear. They know the job the best, and I think, you know, that's extremely important to have their skill base with our department. And you know, even though the most senior officers projected to get the least amount of money, that's because I need to encourage and retain the people that have been here between 1 and 5 years, because those are the ones that are going to leave. They're the ones that are going to go look for the higher salary because they have that flexibility, and they don't have a lot of seniority. So that's kind of my perspective.
Councilmember Hinton, I think, you know, obviously it's pretty self-explanatory how important it is to our types of organizations to retain members that have high levels of experience. Right now, I did an audit on our workforce within the fire department, and those members with less than 5 years experience in the fire service, specifically in Fountain, is right about 50%. And so we've got a very young department. You know, the upside of Fountain is that we are a busy department with lots of activity and activity that gives our members a high amount of experience in a short amount of time, generally speaking. And so even though we are a young department by experience, we're highly skilled, highly functioning, but it's, you know, obviously extremely important to retain that experience for as long as we can.
Thank you, Chiefs.
Councilmember Hertzberg.
Yes, thank you. And this is for both the chiefs. I want to say first, having been a hiring manager for years, decades really, I understand how expensive it is to retrain. So I just want to ask a couple things. First, would you say that the turnover rate for our public safety is on par or more than other communities of comparable size? When people leave, what would you say the most common reason for leaving would be? And then for fire, just one follow-up question. Do we pay for any EMT or paramedic training for new officers?
Councilmember Hertzberg, first welcome. Glad to have you up there. In answer to your questions, can you repeat the second part of your question? I remember the first part, but the second part.
The first part was how expensive it is to retrain. Right. The second one is how our retention and turnover rates compare to comparable cities.
I think we're in the neighborhood of, it's well over $100,000 to get an officer fully outfitted and trained. That's including salary, all of the things that are required. And it's, I'm going to knock on wood and say that Fountain retains our employees very well. Our culture here, our culture at the police department, I believe I don't have the turnover that other departments do. I want to keep that. There's a couple of incentives with a little bit of a pay increase and the culture with the city, and I think if we stay the course, I feel like I'm doing better than most. All the chiefs I talk to and sheriffs that I talk to, they are hurting terribly for officers and deputies. I will also propose that a town this size is not going to be able to stay at 68 officers for very long with the projected population coming. So while I retain and I do a good job at that, I think we're gonna need more. But that's from the police side.
And I would.
Was that all your? Did he get all three? Okay.
Got all three of them. Councilmember Hertzberg, I would echo just about the same sentiment on the cost for training, including salaries, right about $100,000. I think our training generally is a little bit more cost effective than the PD. They're expensive and needy over there, and we're resourceful. And are we on par? I think that staffing needs, I network with chiefs throughout the region and throughout other states, and it's a consistent theme through the departments, particularly when you come to having to recruit and retain paramedics. That's key, especially to those of us that operate ambulance transport services. Really difficult to do that without paramedics. And so that's one of our biggest challenges. I'll say in the time that I've been here, we have seen a number of paramedics come and go just in the less than a year and a half that I've been here. That has to do with a number of reasons. There are some that don't pan out, don't end up being performers like we expected them to be. The other consideration for paramedics is what we call burnout. Paramedic career lifespan is usually 6 to 8 years, depending on what statistics you go by, before they move on to do something else. And so if you keep a paramedic for longer than that, then you're doing really well. And there's usually a reason that they stick around. Do we pay for EMT and paramedic? The answer to that is yes, we do. In fact, the budget that you've got in front of you tonight has some money built in to send 3 of our firefighter EMTs to paramedic school this upcoming year. It's always, I'll say this, if we can recruit somebody who's firefighter trained and paramedic, or if we can recruit somebody who's a paramedic, it's always easier and cheaper to put them through firefighting training rather than through paramedic. However, if we can take employees that are already here, already established, already shown to be members in good standing and loyal to the department, then it makes sense for us to grow our own paramedics. I've done this, in my previous agency, and it's usually done with a high amount of success, and those are the employees that usually stick around, thus helping with our retention issue, particularly at the paramedic level. Does that answer your questions?
It does, thank you.
All right.
I did not answer all 3 of your questions.
I want to add, are you going to mention your recruit program? Would you?
I sure will.
Because I think that ties into that last part. For the
Yes, in answer to your 3rd question, luckily I have helpers in the audience and at home that help me remember and send me texts. The reason officers leave, typically, the reason they leave Fountain is for more opportunity at larger departments. I have a limited amount of opportunities. While I'm a full-service department and I provide all the same opportunities, the numbers aren't there. And once folks are in the positions they're in, such as detective or K-9, they usually stay there because they really like the job. And so that doesn't provide a lot of opportunity. So that's one of the main reasons why officers leave. And then finally, as city manager mentioned, we have a recruit program here with the police department where we take what I call the top round draft pick, and somebody that we are sponsoring through either the State College Academy or the El Paso County Sheriff's Academy, and we pay them a much smaller salary to go to the academy, but it basically pays for their academy at the end, so there's no out-of-pocket cost for them. El Paso County is very generous right now, and they only charge us for ammunition to go to their academy, so that's very inexpensive for a very expensive process that they have our guys through. The State College is a little bit different, but that's our recruit program. We only do about 1 or 2 recruits a year because we make sure they're really somebody that we've vetted and that really have committed to this city.
So most of your new hires are cross-lateral from other departments?
Yes, ma'am. We hire, other officers, just as people leave Fountain. We have lots of officers in other agencies that want to come work for Fountain. So it's borrowing and stealing from other agencies. It's the nature of the business. It's always been that way.
Okay, Councilmember Rick, do you have a question?
Couple of comments. Last week, the Fountain Police Department responded to 544 calls for service. If you break that down, that's between 3 and 4 calls for service every hour of every day of the week. That's how intense they're doing. For our fire department, there were 92 calls for service. About 2/3 of those were for ambulance service, about 1/3 for fire. But when you add those all together, every 2 hours, a fire department station is responding to a call from service. Every 2 hours of every day of the week. So they do have a heavy load in public service that they are dealing with. That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you. Unless anybody has any direct questions for staff, I'd like to go ahead and discuss the two options that Scott proposed with. Okay, for the 3% raise for the employees and then for the 2B. Is there any feeling on what anybody's wanting to do for that? Does anybody have a problem with it? I know we've discussed this a lot, but does anybody want to make any comments or that? Or just somebody just want to include it in the motion or just include it in the motion? Okay, all righty. Okay, with that, what would council like to do with item 8A, the second reading of ordinance number 1796? Councilmember Rick.
Move to approve second reading of ordinance 1796 with amendments for pay raises and 2B. Sylvia, does that qualify?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, and Councilmember Hersberg.
I'd like to second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further deliberation amongst the council? Okay, seeing none, please vote.
Seven yes, motion carried.
Thank you, council.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all your hard work. And John, thank you so much for your work for the years. So thank you so much. Shauna, congratulations, and that we do, but y'all have just been put through the ringer this year, and yep, all right. That takes it on to item 9, consideration of items removed from the consent agenda. There were none. Item B, appointment of Mayor Pro Tem. Ms. Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Prior to the start of the council meeting tonight, I did put out to our current council members and who would be interested in even serving in that position of Mayor Pro Tem. In doing so, I did ask the council a polling question and how they felt the direction of those members that put their name in the hat, and I can, for the public, let you know that Councilmember Rick and Councilmember Duncan are the two members that actually put in and are interested in that position. So prior to tonight's meeting, I did hand out a poll to City Council. Now, this in no means is a vote, but I will read the numbers that were received by City Council for these two members, and then it's up to Council to make a decision or a motion in one direction or the other. So after reviewing the poll answers that I have, I have 4 that answered for Councilmember Rick and 3 that answered for Councilmember Duncan. Now, there is a motion that's required from City Council on either one of these choices.
Councilmember Estes.
I move to appoint Gordon Rick as Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Councilmember Rick?
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for Councilmember Rick for Mayor Pro Tem. Is this going to be on our screens or a verbal vote?
Hoping we can get it on your screen here. Hang on just a moment. Okay, it should be on your screen now.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Any opposed, vote no.
Four yes, 3 no. Let me look at the screen here. Councilmember Corey, Councilmember Duncan, and Councilmember Hinton voting no. Motion carried.
All right, thank you very much. Congratulations, Mayor Pro Tem. All righty. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next item. Resolution number 23-058, a resolution amending the appropriation of fiscal year FY 2023 budgeted funds. Mr. Lewis.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. As you are aware, we just passed the 2024 budget. The 2023 budget was passed back on November 15th, 2022, and has been amended a few times by City Council as we've been made aware of additional revenues that have come in that are restricted to certain spending, or as certain items come up during the year that we were not aware of during the budget preparation back in 2022. So we have brought, and we have to do this as part of the state regulations, any additional grant revenue that has restricted spending, we're bringing that forward. We also have insurance proceeds from hail damage, and we need your approval to spend the money to fix the hail damaged cars, and other expenditures for certain improvements that have come up, including the beginning of the improvement or the repair of the bridges that were damaged during the rainstorms this past summer. So with that, if we could go to the next slide here, I guess I can do it myself. I'm getting smarter, Chris. So as you can see, we've got in the general fund unearned ARPA revenue. We can only record the revenue that we have sitting in a bucket in a cash account from ARPA. It's approximately $7.5 million that we received, and we only show that as earned revenue once it's spent. So we have $11,250 that we want to spend on equipment for the Office of Emergency Management trailer. We also have insurance proceeds from SURSA to the extent of $243,430, and we'll show where that hits a number of departments. We also have a grant. It's actually going to be a $2.8 million grant from the National Resource Conservation Service. It's part of USDA. And it's a reimbursable grant. So we're showing $20,000 now because we want to spend $20,000 to improve and start working on the Bandley Bridge that's over Clover Ditch. As far as the expenses, I mentioned the OEM expenditures. We also have $2,400 that we need to spend on computer equipment for PD for some new officers, and the maintenance service contracts with Microsoft and Duo, the licenses for those individuals. We also, because we have not fully implemented Paylocity software as yet, we need to extend the software for NeoGov, which we thought would have been canceled by now. So we need to extend it for another 6 months. We've also got third-party reviews by Matrix Design, and that's going to be paid out of professional services for and from salary savings. Other expenditures within the general fund include conceptual planning and design for Fire Station 4, and traffic control equipment with a battery backup. You can then see the vehicles in administration, PD, fire, streets, building maintenance, code, parks, and fleets that will all be covered by the insurance for hail damage. And last but not least, initially we had budgeted the Verigy solar lease to all come out of electric, but much of it is benefiting the general fund, so the general fund needs to pay for a portion of that, and so we're asking for that. So as you can see, the total expenditures is $382,224. $12,000 is covered by salary savings, and the net impact to unrestricted unassigned reserves is $93,100. 544. There's also insurance proceeds coming into the water fund and the electric fund also to pay for vehicle maintenance on their vehicles. We also have insurance proceeds coming into the public transportation fund to pay for the hail damage on those vehicles, and the ambulance fund as well. The last item is the drainage fund. We have already budgeted improvements for the bridge repair over Old Pueblo Road in the Jimmy Camp drainage, and that will be reimbursable as a portion of that grant. So at this point, we're not asking for any more expenditures, but we're just indicating that we are going to be able to get reimbursed for $50,000 that we'll be spending in 2023. So with that, I'd like to ask if there are any questions over the Resolution 23-058, amending the 2023 budget.
Okay, is there any questions or comments from anybody on council? Any questions or comments from anyone in the audience? If so, just please come down the mic. I don't see any movement.
Okay, with that,
Okay.
I'd like to ask City Council to approve Resolution 23-058.
Okay, what would Councilmember Duncan?
I move to approve resolution number 23-058.
Councilmember Hinton?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further deliberation? Seeing none, please vote.
Seven yes, motion carried.
Thank you, Council.
All right, thank you. All right, this takes us on to item D, City Council Board and Committee appointments. We have a number of boards and commissions that we're responsible for and we represent the city on. And when we represent the city on those boards and commissions, we're representing the city's positions. And even if sometimes if our own personal decision is a little bit different, we're still representing the city position. And with that, I hope everybody brought their list tonight. If not, well, I'll just go through them one by one. How's that? Because it looks like not everybody brought their list with them tonight. Okay, so the list Sylvia gave out to us. The first board and commission that we have is the Colorado Municipal League. And the dates and times are determined by CML. The meetings happen several times a year and are usually 2 to 4 hours in length. I am the current primary and Councilmember Duncan has been the alternate. Is there anybody who is interested in being the primary on that board? Let me get back to the delegates thing. Okay, all righty. Anybody interested in being primary or alternate on that board? Okay. All right, I'll stand as primary. Scott, would you be interested in being the alternate on that board?
If no council member wants to be an alternate on that, you were talking about the CML Legislative Policy
The
Committee?
Legislative Policy
Yeah,
Committee, right. Did
okay.
anybody want to be the primary on that?
Okay.
Oh,
It wasn't offered to council, so
oh,
yes.
oh, it was at first, yeah.
You only offered the main position. You did not offer the alternate. You offered it to Scott.
Yeah, I would definitely not want to be if a council member wants to be, for sure.
Okay, all righty. Councilmember Duncan, were you interested in being something on the legislative? Did you want to be the primary or the alternate?
I would like to be the primary, the alternate for CML.
Okay, I just didn't hear what you said. Thank you very much. All righty. Scott, would you be interested in being the primary?
I mean, I used to be the primary years ago, but I'm happy, excuse me, I'm happy to do that if no council member wants to do that. I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay. All righty, so we'll put Scott down as the primary. All right, next board on the list is the Fountain Creek Watershed District. And the Fountain Creek Watershed District has been represented, the chairperson is Councilmember Estes, but it looks like, and you are still termed in for that? It says 1/3/24? 1/31/24?
Yeah,
Through January.
Through January.
Okay, and then the alternate on that board is Councilmember Duncan. They usually take place the third Friday of the month at 9 a.m. unless otherwise noted. So is there anyone, council member, interested in being the primary on that board?
I'm good with staying on as primary, but if Ms. Duncan wants that, I'm coming to the end as the chair. We'll turn to Pueblo, so I'm not going to be chair next year anyway, so I'm good either way.
Councilmember Duncan, did you want to stay on that board?
I can stay on the board. Again, it doesn't make any difference because the primary is going to Pueblo. So
Well, the chairmanship is going to Pueblo, but we still need a primary member on the board.
I understand
A
that.
primary and an alternate. Okay.
so if no one else wants to, I'll stay as the secondary.
Okay, Councilmember Estes, you want to stay as primary? Okay. Okay, we have the Fountain Urban Renewal Authority. The current council member is Councilmember Estes. Ms. Bailey, can you come up and kind of explain that board? It's a little bit different than the normal boards we have up here. Not that it's abnormal, but it's a little bit different.
My pleasure. Kimberly Bailey, Executive Director for the Fountain Urban Renewal Authority. So the urban renewal, as established by council, is 5-year terms. The mayor appoints the appointee to that board of representation. Ms. Estes was just recently reappointed in 2023 for a subsequent 5-year term. However, she has some personal evening obligations that is prohibiting her to continue. And so we have the remaining 4 years that need to be fulfilled. And in discussions, we've talked to a few of the council members. It seems that Ms. Hershberger, coming in her appointmentship, has a strong interest to participate and fulfill that remaining term.
Okay, Ms. Hershberg, would you like to be appointed to that board?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Is there a form or something for that, or?
For the URA?
Yeah.
No.
All right, consider Ms. Councilmember Hershberg appointed. It would take me a few minutes to get used to calling you Councilmember Hershberg.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right,
We would love both of you to
congratulations.
join us at our January meeting, just so we can say thank you, Ms. Estes, for your service, and then welcome in Ms. Hershberger as well to the board formally.
Okay, that takes us to the Fountain Valley Housing Authority. They meet the third Thursday of each month at 6 p.m. At the Office of the Housing Authority. Our current board member there is Councilmember Hinton.
Yes, I'd like to stay as primary for anybody that doesn't want it, but I'd like to stay there.
Okay, and it works out good with your work schedule, so.
It does.
Yeah. All right. All right, Fountain Valley Senior Center. Fountain Valley Senior Center meets the fourth Wednesday of each month at 1 p.m. at the Senior Center. I am rotating off that board. It was unusual that we had 2 members on that board. We normally just have 1. I was on the board, Councilmember Estes was on the board before she was on the council, representing the Historical Society, and you are now the chairman on that board. And so you would be the only council member on that board, which is more in the normal situation of what occurs. And so since you are the chairman on that board, are you wanting to continue to represent the council? Yes. Okay, unless anybody else? Okay. And that takes us to the Pike Peak Area Council of Governments. The PPACG meets tomorrow, the second Wednesday of each month in the mornings. And there, before we go forward, and on that one, I am the chair on that board, and I have put my name in the hat to continue in that position for the second year, which is the director has asked for that position to stay on as 2 years, and I'm willing to stay on for that second year, assuming that the other board members elect me to that. But there is an opening on one of the subcommittee councils off of that board, the Regional Advisory Council. And the Regional Advisory Council is part of the AAA, which is the Area on Aging. They meet the fourth Thursday of each month at 10 a.m. At the PPACG offices. And the Regional Advisory Council deals a lot with the requests that come in for the funding for that area. And you have the really, really difficult job if you have $2 million worth of funding and you have $10 million worth of requests, you have the difficult job of sorting through those requests and figuring out kind of what you guys have to do on the block grant, and how to spread that money out and for the greatest part. So that is an opening that is not normally listed, but we do need a fountain person on that committee. So in addition to the PPACG, the primary and the alternate, then you would be the primary on that, Regional Advisory Council Board. So I would personally like to stay on as the primary on the Pikes Peak Area Council of Government Board. The current alternate is Councilmember Duncan. What would you like to do?
I'd like to stay on as the alternate.
As the alternate? Okay. All righty. And is there anybody who might be interested in considering being appointed to the Regional Advisory Council?
I would like to be appointed to the regional advisory.
According to the PPACG bylaws, you can be on the board or you can be on a committee, because the committees advise and then you vote on things on the board, so you can't be on both. So you'd have to be on one or the other.
Well, that's confusing. That's confusing because as alternate, I've never voted on anything.
But you do have the possibility to vote, and so that's their bylaws state that anyone who is a primary or an alternate on the board, you cannot be on one of the advisory committees. So those are their bylaws.
Yeah, I understand the bylaws, but as I said before, when they went through all of the positions, you're the chair, and the chair has an alternate, and the alternate has an alternate, and they went through a list of alternates, right? So what is the function of the alternate for Fountain?
On the PPACG board?
Yes.
If I was not able to attend the meeting, you would attend the meeting as a regular voting member, not as a chair, but it just as a regular voting member if I was not able to attend that day. Just like you've subbed for me at, CML one time when I wasn't attending.
Okay.
So are you wanting to stay on as which position?
I want to stay on as the alternate as I am right now.
Okay, all righty. So is there anyone else who is interested in being on the Regional Advisory Council? Okay? Yeah, you can't, it probably would be a conflict of interest with you being on the senior board, and you would be putting in for money. That would be a conflict of interest, yeah. Councilmember Rick?
If no one else wants it, I'll do the Regional Advisory Board.
Regional Advisory, okay, great. Thank you. All right, and Sylvia will just prepare a letter that says he's been appointed to that. Okay, all righty. And that takes us to the Pikes Peak Regional Building Department. And that board meets the third Wednesday of each month at 12:30. I think they serve lunch beforehand, so if you get there and they serve lunch, I've heard it's pretty good. And at 11:30. And our current member on that was Richard Applegate, who has been termed out of that position. Is there anyone on the board who would be interested in being on the Regional Building Department? Councilmember Corey.
I heard there's an opening in that department, and given my construction background, I would like that, so.
I'm getting real dry. I'm really losing my voice here. Okay, all righty. So Councilmember Corey is going to be our member on that board. That board, we did verify with their bylaws, they do not have an alternate on that board. We don't have an alternate position. So if you're not there, we're not represented. So, all right, make sure you're there. All righty, and they do not have a meeting in December, so, yeah, so they're January. That gives you plenty of time for them to get you onboarded, okay? Okay, and that takes us to the Fountain Youth Council. And the Fountain Youth Council has a youth-centered advisory council, and they meet at least monthly during the school year, I believe that is, right? You don't meet during the summer. Okay, it's during the school year. And the current representative for us on the Fountain Youth Council is Councilmember Duncan. And were you interested in continuing with that?
I'm not.
You're not? Okay. All righty. Okay. All right. So I'm not seeing anybody speak up, so we'll have to have a bigger conversation on that. Sylvia? Okay. All righty. Okay, so I believe that is all the boards and positions that we have that are on there. And thank you, everybody. Oop, I lost my agenda and all that. I'm sorry? Okay, and that takes us on to item 10, City Council Agenda Request. City Council shall use this time to request any items for future consideration. And I'm going to start to my left tonight. Councilmember Rick.
Nothing tonight, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Corey.
Nothing tonight.
Councilmember Hinton.
Nothing tonight, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Estes.
Nothing this evening.
Councilmember Hersberg.
Nothing tonight.
Councilmember Duncan.
I don't have anything.
Okay, that takes us to item 11, announcement of an executive session. In accordance with the city charter and the Colorado Open Meetings Act, the city council in open session is to determine whether it will hold a closed executive session. A closed executive session may be held upon the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the quorum present. If consent to the closed executive session is not given, the purpose may be in the discussion. Sylvia, I'm just stepping all over your part because I'm on a roll.
No, I got it. I just want to request a couple executive sessions pursuant to CRS Section 24-6-424 for the purpose of review, approval, and amendment of executive session minutes, and another one pursuant to CRS Section 24-6-424B for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions regarding home-based businesses. Entertain a motion on that, please.
Okay, we have a request from the city clerk for a motion for executive session. Councilmember Rick.
Move we go into executive session.
Councilmember Hinton.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Seven yes, motion carried.
All right, thank you very much. And with that, I adjourn the meeting, and we will take a 10-minute break so if everybody can be back at 7:41.